All right, we're live.
Hey yo, what's up? What's up?
Welcome to your Everyday Rich podcast.
We're your hosts.
Oh, that was in sync.
Was that Jinx? What did they say? Jinx?
That's what our kids say.
Yeah.
Well, we're your host. I'm Jen.
I'm Jason. Welcome back. Welcome to. I'm gonna hopefully say welcome back to your Everyday Rich. Today we have been thinking about talking about this topic. If you've already probably read it on the description, I've had it on our idea board, I guess our topic board for a while, and I think it's kind of stemmed from just a conversation, obviously a living room conversation, but part of our upbringing, like seeing our parents and how they kind of looked at debt, but also how we've observed the society norms around debt have not really changed at all in like 30 years. And this whole thing about debt being bad and
it's a bad word.
It is always a bad connotation where it almost makes you feel like you're a piece of shit for taking on debt.
Or when you have debt.
Yeah, when you have debt. And
it's like you did something wrong with your life.
And it's like always this burden that you have. And I remember my parents talking about like, oh, save your money, don't take on debt. It's a bad thing to have. And growing up with that, you just kind of you kind of frame it the wrong way. You see it as this bad thing, whereas when you get exposed to the other side of things, right? Because remember, there's always two sides of the coin.
Well, yeah, because we eventually learned about what good debt, like there's still debt that's bad, right? But now we understand what good debt is and bad debt is, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, people just use different words. Like it's literally just a word called leverage. where in the investor circle or in the business circle, the business communities, they basically say, you know what? No, I'm leveraging my assets to build something
more or to make more.
Yeah, to make more.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how if you just take one word and you flip it and just call it a different thing, it's actually okay. Whereas it's the same thing. But the key differentiator is how you utilize it.
Yeah.
Right. And
well, yes, what are you using it for?
Yeah, exactly. Right? I think when it comes down to it, like, I mean, we do live in a world driven by consumerism, unfortunately, because, like we want to look rich, we want to feel rich. So we buy the shit we can't afford. And what do? We take on debt. What does society tell us? We take on debt. What does school teach us? Nothing about it.
Yeah.
So what do? We continue the practice and the cycle of taking on more money that we can't afford.
Yeah.
But this isn't a rant about social norms. This is a episode where we want to just talk about in a living room conversation about how to tackle it. Because at some point, you have to deal with it.
Yeah. Right?
There are forms where like you have to take on leverage at some point or debt in your life. And I want to kind of give this sidebar to this story where I remember when just coming out of university, there was a friend that I remember him mentioning just the topic about buying cars, right? You started making a little bit of money, you want to buy a car. His thought process was like, I never want to take on debt. I will never finance a car. Like I'll buy it cash outright. I don't want to finance that. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I don't see that as wrong. If anything, that's pretty clever to not put yourself in a position where you are financing something you can't afford. But I also looked at it many, many years down the road as this thing where I think it would be very limiting because you only saw it as a bad thing. And I remember that to the day because that story expanded to like, no, I want enough money to be able to pay off my house, like almost a large amount.
Like in cash?
Yeah. And I was just like, well, is that going to be really realistic? Right. So, it kind of stems from that. I remember that conversation very vividly, but it all started from this car
Yeah.
conversation, and this whole thing about reframing it. So if we reframe ourselves to say, okay, you know what? Hey, it's inevitable that we take on these loans, these debts, right? Because at some point you will have to.
Hmm.
What do we do about it, right? Because let me also just mention too, right, Jen? Like, you're not a bad person if you're listening to this and you have debts, you're in over your head, or you have loans that you feel like shouldn't have been taken out. You're not a bad person, all right? We are all learning and understanding through the mistakes, right? The tuition of life is exactly this, is the mistakes we make in our life. This is not like school where, you have to get the answer right on the first try. But hopefully all these things that we talk about today, you can use
Yep.
towards
Dealing with your debt.
dealing with that. Okay. So please don't feel that way, because I know you may have those feelings of saying, oh, I just don't feel good. It's like, and obviously we know we don't feel good if we were to take on certain loans that would make us not lose sleep.
Yep.
So, okay, straight to it. Let's
So how to deal
there's
with debt?
how to deal with debt. So we kind of broke this up into like 3 ways that we would tackle this, right?
Well, before we go into tackling debt, like we need to define kind of the types of debts that the typical consumer can have.
Yeah. So I think if you just relate it to your everyday life, like what do you borrow money against? Like, how do you borrow money? The first common thing is a credit card.
Yep.
Which is probably the easiest thing to get access to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you remember back in the school days when you signed up for when you were in university?
Student visas.
MBNA has this is not a shout out to MBNA, by the way, but MBNA was like the number one credit card through Visa or MasterCard. They're like, sign up for this low, no fee interest credit card
Yeah.
and get a free t-shirt or something.
Yeah.
I remember signing up for a whole bunch of them just to get a free t-shirt, but I never used the card. But anyways, credit card debt is one.
Student loans.
Student loans, a big thing, right?
Mortgage, obviously.
Mortgage, and then back to that conversation I had with a friend, car loan,
Car loans. Line of credits.
line of credits, HELOCs, uh, bookie loans,
Loans from your family.
loans, yeah, IOUs from your family or your friends. So
That's a debt.
really, it's like basically think of any way you borrow money, okay? And how we like to kind of compartmentalize that and differentiate that is essentially, okay, well, what's high interest debt and low interest debt? Okay, it's not this whole thing of good debt, bad debt. Okay, this is nothing about that. This is essentially, now we want to say, okay, well, how do we look at tackling this?
Mm-hmm.
Because what's our reference point? We don't know what to start with. So the reference point would also essentially always be like
The stock market.
Yeah.
So your typical stock market returns, I would say 7 to 8%.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So anything that has an interest rate of higher than 7 to 8%, would categorize that as a high interest debt.
Yeah.
And anything below the 7 to 8% interest, we would consider that as a low interest debt.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because the amount that you have borrowed at higher than the stock market amount, like you cannot use that money to make more than what your stock market can typically return for you, which was the 70%.
Yeah.
Versus a low interest debt is, yes, if you borrow that money and you invest it, let's say, in a stock market, you could potentially make 7 to 8% or more on that money that you borrowed.
Yeah. Because you'll always hear that reference, right? On average, the stock market makes X% back. So it's always a baseline. We have to baseline it against something for you to compare it to. So, okay, so now I know what debts I have. Now I know what my baseline in terms of
what's high and what's low.
What's high and low. What are all right, Jen, like, how do I do this? Like, what strategies do I use to do this, to pay off my debt? because you know what, like, I don't know about you, I don't have like $12 million of liquid cash sitting in my bank account to just pay off all my debts, right? And I don't think a lot of people have that much cash to pay off all the debts.
Yeah.
So we got to be realistic about this. Okay, so how do we strategize this?
So the first thing to do is what I would do is list out all the debts that you have.
Yep.
Right? Every single thing, every credit card, every mortgage, every student loan, every HELOC, every single thing. And then beside each debt that you have, list out the associated interest rate with that loan.
Yeah. So you got the loan, it's the loan type, the interest rate, and the amount owing, right?
Correct.
And then also add that one category. What's the minimum payments I need to make
Yeah.
to actually pay it off? And when I say minimum, it's not minimum to maintain that balance, it's to actually pay it off. Like there is a payment. I guess it's confusing because in credit card, when you say minimum payment, it doesn't do anything. It's all interest.
Yeah.
Right. But on your loans, there's typically a payment amount. Okay. So just look at what the payment amount is to move down the needle a little bit. Okay. So you got this.
So you got your list, and basically what we're going to introduce you to is 3 ways that we think, or 3 strategies of tackling that list, paying off the debts that are on that list.
Yeah, and this is very Canadian because it's like evolves around winter analogies. Okay, but it's just it's the common things that are common strategies that have been talked about in the finance world. So financial literacy and kind of this topic. So first topic, it's the snowball effect,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in the snowball effect, you're essentially looking at, you know what? I like the way you described this. Why don't you say this one?
So the snowball effect essentially is looking at, let's say you made 10, so let's say you have 10 debts, right? And you list them out. The snowball effect is essentially taking the debt of the smallest amount and paying that off first. So you have 10 things, you pay off the minimum for all 10 things that you need to pay. And then whatever money you have left over, even if it's $5, you put that towards the lowest amount debt.
Okay. So essentially, you want to keep trickling that into the next lowest debt repayment. So if there's an example, just numbers, right? Arbitrarily, if you have a credit card payment that's $100, right? The minimum payment, or whatever that payment is, you pay the $100. And let's say after 6 months, you've paid off that debt. Now you would have $100 freed up, right? That you would apply to your
second lowest.
Let's say it's 150.
Yeah.
Okay. You do that for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And after 6 months, you've freed up now another 150. So now you have $100 from your first loan repayment and 150 from the second loan repayment. Now you have 250 combined
to pay off your third lowest debt.
Exactly. See how that snowball gets bigger and bigger as you get through that list.
And the advantage of this strategy is that it's like almost like a logical thing. You know how when you have 10 things on your to-do list, and you're able to cross off even one item,
mm-hmm.
It's like it encourages you to keep going and move on to the next item. Yep. So what this does is basically now instead of you have 10 things that are 10, whether it's people or entities that you own, that you owe, now you have 9.
Yep.
Right? So over time, you're basically crossing one off the list each time. Yeah. Each month, each year, whatever it is, how long it takes to like get that thing off the list.
Yeah, and it's great. I love this strategy because like you have to understand your personality first,
mm-hmm.
and what encourages you, right?
Yeah.
And it's this thing about almost like your daily to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
If you tackle one thing at a time, right, bite size, you get rid of those things. The small wins. It's like you're building these small wins throughout the day.
Yeah.
But really now they just apply to your debt repayments.
Mm-hmm.
So the easy ones, if you get those easy ones off quicker, it's like those nice quick wins, gives you momentum, and it helps you really build towards, now I'm like, you know what? I got this.
Yeah.
Right? I got this.
Keep going.
Keep going. and it doesn't become this daunting feat of like, oh my god, I got like, how do I tackle this? Is so
Yep.
big, right? Because sometimes it's really like, if I look at something like, I'm like, shit, I got, oh, what's the analogy? I got 10 miles to run, right? Like runners, if you've never run, you're like, oh my god, how do I run 10 miles, or how do I run 100 miles?
Run one.
Right? You one run. Exactly. It's just like David Goggins said in his book. He was like, how the hell do I do all this?
Yeah.
Is you do it one step at a time, right?
Yeah.
So
So that's the first strategy.
first strategy.
Second strategy.
Yeah, the second one, second one is called the avalanche strategy. And this strategy, it is essentially, you are looking at your highest debt amount that you have owing. Sorry. Jeez. Oh my god. I'm gonna cut that out. Let's cut that out.
Okay. Highest interest.
All right.
So the second strategy.
So the second strategy is called the avalanche strategy. And this is essentially looking at the highest interest rate owing that you have versus the snowball effect. Did we even mention this? Like the snowball effect, you do not care about the interest rate.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we didn't say that, we said it now. Okay. But avalanche, you don't look at the value, you don't look at the amount in terms of how you're owing. You look at what is the highest interest, because ultimately, when it comes down to debt repayments, the more interest you owe, the more interest you can pay down. You save more money in the long run. So, okay, going back now, what do I have? I have these 10 loans or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of looking at the smallest amount, I'm looking at the highest interest. So what would that be most likely? Credit cards.
Typically in the 20% range, right?
Exactly, 20 plus annualized. So I want to tackle, let's go to the Visa card. Let's go to that Amex. Let's go to that whatever. Okay. Goddamn, that MBNA one that people probably took on when they were in university.
Yep.
But that's the one you want to tackle. And by tackling that one first, you are ultimately saving more money in the long run, because now you're taking the most money that you are giving back to the bank, let's just say, and it's putting back into your pocket. So I tackle those at first, because now I'm taking a larger chunk. I'm paying down a larger amount,
mm-hmm.
right? And that could be whatever you want. Like it could be a big amount, small amount, but tackle the one with the highest interest rate. That's the key here.
Yep.
Okay. And that pretty much, like, now you have, okay, I have bite size, I have big, right? Snowball, avalanche.
Yep.
There's also one other way.
There's one more.
Right? Because at some point, you have, if I've paid off 3 of the 10 ones, or I've paid off 2 of the highest interest ones, that leaves me with fewer and fewer debts.
Mm-hmm.
But I still have some left. Could there be one way to combine them?
Yeah, debt consolidation.
Yeah. Okay.
Is number 3. And this is the key strategy for this, is using lower interest debt to pay off high interest debt. So let's say you do have a credit card at 20% interest. Can you get another loan of lower interest? So let's say maybe you have access to a line of credit that's at a lower interest rate. Can you, in that case, you would take the amount from the line of credit, borrow from your line of credit, and then pay off your credit card, and then keep paying off your line of credit at lower interest.
Yeah. And you kind of have to look at the math too, right? Because sometimes taking on a loan, you may end up paying higher monthly amounts
mm-hmm.
of that loan, because the way it's structured, like a loan requires you to pay a minimum amount to take down that balance. It may not just be interest only, right? Whereas like a credit card payment, they just need you to put $10 in just to maintain the interest amount.
Yeah.
But you're not really paying anything off. The interest keeps going up. You're actually not even tackling any of that interest. So it just becomes a question about, like, can you, now that you've reduced the overall amounts of debts you have,
can you make the minimum payments?
Yeah. Can you take that now, that momentum that you have, whether it's from avalanche or snowball, can you keep that amount and now consolidate that to pay it off quicker, right? Because now you're just making things a bit easier for yourself.
Yep.
Because ultimately, like, these are creative ways that you don't have to just use snowball or avalanche. It's total flexibility up to you. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with.
Coming up with the plan.
Yeah, coming up with a plan. And it all started with this whole, like, you writing down what you have.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people like it's not you don't have to use one of the three ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most likely your plan is going to look like a combination
Yeah.
of all three of them.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, what I would do if I had 10 things that I had to pay, I would knock off the smallest ones, right? So I would start with the snowball effect, find like all my small debts. Maybe they're like $100 credit cards,
Yeah.
maybe a couple $100 here, a couple $100 here. Get rid of the small ones as fast as I could. And the remaining ones where you have like the higher amounts, like the mortgages, like the bigger numbers, maybe you use the avalanche effect, right? So your plan could be most likely will be a combination of the two. And it could even be like again debt consolidation. I've heard of other people um, using again. You have to be really disciplined at this though.
Yes.
Is using another credit card. Let's say a new credit card that's offering zero interest for let's say 2 years, or 3 years, or 6 months, or whatever. I've gotten Scotiabank letters where they're going to offer me a credit card for like zero interest for a next period of time. But again, you have to be really disciplined on this. But you could use, let's say, a low interest credit card to pay off a high interest credit card,
Mm-hmm.
assuming that you will not take more debt on your low interest credit card.
Yeah.
Right. So there's different strategies, but again, it's all about coming up with the plan that works for you. And again, one thing I want to mention also is be realistic about your plan. Because I understand we all want to pay off our debt, and you want to pay for your debt as quickly as possible. You also got to be realistic about it. Like in the day, you still have to live. You got to put food in your mouth. You still got to pay for your shelter. You got to pay for other things. So just be realistic when it comes to the plan. Like don't get to the point where you are 100% struggling to make that repayment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Make that repayment plan realistic towards what you need to live your life.
I couldn't say it any better, because like it just comes down to your everyday rich, right? If you want to live raw man life, go all out it, right? But if it's up to me, I want to live raw man life with a few boiled eggs. Right? And maybe some corn and some vegetables. So whatever. Like that's the whole thing, is don't make it all about just the debt repayments. Like you're only focused on that. Because really it's like when it comes down to it, like all debt repayments and no fun make Jack and Jill a dull boy and girl.
Well, you're gonna be miserable.
Yeah, like you know what I'm saying? Like what just sucks. It just sucks because you want to have that avocado into your burrito and not worried about, oh man, I could put this $1.50 towards my debt repayment. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like just look at it realistically and come up with a time frame as well.
Yeah.
And there's no saying that says, oh, you must repay it within 2 years. Come up with a plan that says, you know what, this is my 1-year plan
and stick to it.
This is my 5-year plan, my 2-year plan, my 10-year, whatever it is, right? Like and it's all based on relative to the type of loan you have.
Yeah.
Obviously you don't want to hold credit card debts for 10 years, right? So you might want to tackle it that way. Look at essentially what's costing you most, what's gonna essentially get you that momentum, but also give you that flexibility at some point, you know, at year 3. Oh, you know, I've tackled all these small ones, or this one big one. It's freed up more funds. Now I'm able to still address my debts, but also now I can enjoy a little bit more, right? Because shit costs money. So
yep,
you want to be able to at least enjoy a few things. So you know, one other thing too I want to say is that, you know, there's this big thing in, if you might hear this, where it's like, you know, why would I take high interest or bored with the whole debt consolidation like this? Like, oh, you know what, forget paying off my debts, I'd rather just invest, you know, because I can compound my returns faster, right, through whatever, what it's like, you know, hitting the moon on a stock or trading or growing a business 10x within your first year and all that stuff. Yeah, that's all possible. It's all doable. It's been done. But there's this psychological portion of everything that we talked about repaying your debt slowly, but strategically, that gives you peace of mind.
Yeah.
That none of that other stuff can.
Yep.
Okay, because there's no guarantee.
Well, yeah, paying off debt.
Hold on. But there's one guarantee in that paying off debt does, right? Anytime you pay down debt, that is guaranteed return.
Yep.
So think about that. If I had 20% debt interest rate and I paid down a portion of my 20% interest rate debt, that is guaranteed return. It's the same thing, saying like, you know what? I'm getting guaranteed returns on this GIC versus, oh, I might be getting a 6% return on this ETF, right? People need to, if you look at it that way, you reframe it saying like, investing can make you more. However, the debt repayment instantly gives you that return. It's instant and it's guaranteed.
Yep.
Sorry, that was just a little rant I remember hearing. It sounds so much better on some of those TikTok reels, you know? And when it comes out of your mouth, you're like, blah.
Anyhow.
Just sidebar here. That goes to show you like how curated and how bullshit TikTok is sometimes, where it's like it's so heavily edited. I guarantee if you ask some of these like people that talk about finance and all this stuff, tell them to say it once and the first time, they'd be like,
I think scripted, right?
Yeah, so exactly. This is just being real here. But yeah, anyway, so
that's our 3 strategies.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong. You know, it's always good to pay it down because, you know, you want to keep more money in your pocket and not with the man or the woman.
Right.
Anyways, you know where I was heading with that. But yeah, just work towards it, guys. Like, this is a living room conversation. Remember, it started a long time ago, and you know, you might be having them. So don't be afraid to tackle this, to embrace it. But once you kind of understand how debt is utilized or how you pay it off, don't be afraid to take it on again. Like, don't be afraid. Say, you know what? Hey, I paid off all my debts. I will never borrow. Right? Don't be like that. I remember at the beginning of this story, that friend that I was talking about, this person that refuses to take on debt. Yeah. Because
there are some reasons why to take on debt. As long as you have a plan to pay it back, right? That's the whole point, right? You come up with the plan to pay it back.
Yeah. That's it.
Alrighty.
Okay, that was good. All right, well, if you enjoyed it, give us a like, share this, because really what we want to try to do is share these living room conversations with everyone so that hopefully it helps other people sitting in their living rooms, or in our case, in our pseudo podcast studio office thingy jiggy, to really kind of build your everyday rich and really look at things differently, so that, because we're all kind of going through this journey together in this weird, you know, looking at it in a social norm aspect.
Signing off.
Okay. See ya.
See ya.
Peace.
Your Everyday Rich podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. Any such information or other material should not be construed as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional.